Good morning. It is Monday, November 5th, 2018. This is the Muscatine County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First on the agenda is to review the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Motion by Jeff, second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 3, receive comments from the public. Is there anyone that'd like to come and address the board on a subject that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one come forward, we will go to number 4, discussion and possible action to approve claims dated November 5th, 2018 in the amount of $539,664.92.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion by Nathan, a second by Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 5, introduction of emergency manager Brian Wright with Sheriff C.J. Ryan. Morning, C.J.
Fire hazard,
What's your recommendation?
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming here to see me this morning. Well, good morning. As you all know, we had a vacancy in emergency management. The Emergency Management Commission did a job search. We got some decent applicants, we felt. We went ahead and formed a hiring committee and went to interviews and backgrounds on those individuals. What we came up with, we think we were pretty successful. We have a career firefighter from the city of Muscatine. He has retired from that position to take the emergency manager role. He's had a lot of experience not only in public safety and in the fire service, but during the course of his career, a month after 9/11, he was at the 9/11 site in New York. He's also had some previous experience with FEMA in handling hurricanes and other disasters. So some experience beyond his fire service and public safety service. We have made it clear to this individual that moving forward, we want better communication with the commission. We want this person to be very public. We want the public to know what emergency management does and how it can help the communities. And this individual has indicated to us that he's dedicated to do that. And I think he has a passion for the job and he's excited about starting, and we feel he'll do a good job. He is going to be going out to the communities, so the city councils and things of that nature, and meeting them so he can make contact with the community and make them aware of who he is and what he does. So with no further delay, I will give you our candidate that we hired for this position as the new emergency manager, Mr. Brian Wright.
Good morning. I'd also like to thank everybody for coming here and welcoming me to this position. I'm looking forward a great deal. As Sheriff Ryan indicated, I had 36 years on the Muscatine Fire Department. Some great experience that I learned. I'm looking forward to serving the residents of Muscatine County and try to do the best that I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Number 6, discussion regarding slag on county roads with Doug Hoyt and Darrell Sawasin. You want to be the first speaker, Doug?
I'll be the first one, yes.
Okay. I'm going to allow 10 minutes for your presentation.
For me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
No
after
problem.
that, after that, I will hold the time frame to other conversation to 5 minutes, and I will not let this go longer than 30 minutes because we've got a full agenda behind you.
That's fine. We'll fit it in there. First, I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for putting this on the agenda. We got a very serious issue before us right now, and it's called slag. The use of slag needs to stop immediately, and we're going to go through some of those reasons why we feel that. Let me first start off with some questions. The first one I would like to ask is each of you board members, with a show of hands, how many of you do live on a gravel road? Scott, yours is seal coated, that's not gravel.
I'm sorry?
Yours is seal coated, that's not gravel.
Oh, 170 doesn't have any slag that
Where
runs by
you're
my
at,
farm?
you're on seal coated road, where you live, so that's not gravel.
The driveway out of my lane to my house is on seal coat, that's correct.
That's not a gravel road, your driveway is not a gravel road.
I understand
So,
that.
let's move on. So, as you can see, there's a lot of you that haven't lived on a county road, So there, as you'll find out, there's some issues there that maybe you're not aware of. So I got some other questions, and I'll give you this list once I get done with them. I want the answers back by Friday, or postmarked by Friday on these questions. And I'm gonna go through them, and then I'll give you a copy, so you do have a copy of them. First of all, I'd like to know how many ton of rock per mile is used when mixing with slag. What class of rock is used? Is it class A, is it road rock, whatever. Want to know what class it is. And what is the cost per ton of the rock used in mixing with the slag? And then I want to know the transportation cost of the rock to the furthest point. That's our first set of questions. Then I want to do the same thing with slag. How many tons per mile slag is used on the county roads? What is the county's cost per ton of the slag? And then again, what is the transportation cost to the furthest point? I need to know all those answers, because I think we're gonna find out that the slag value is not as great as what you think it is. So those are the questions I kinda wanna ask, get the answers to. So I wanna ask the group that's here today some questions too, and just by a show of hands, how many of you have had flat tires, ruined tires, or broken windshields because of slag? Raise your hand. Okay, another question. How many of you have complained to the county engineer about these issues? And from that, how many of you been told that you're the only one complaining? So we still have a good show of hands, and there's more than this when we talk to the group.
Doug, I'm sorry, can I ask you a question? I want to clarify, I don't have the most experience with, how do you define slag? What is it?
It's the product they're putting on the gravel roads that's coming from Harsco.
Okay, I understand that, but can you tell me, like, we got a board up here?
This is, I'm gonna talk about
Okay,
that in a
as long
second.
as, I
Okay.
just would like to get your idea of what slag
Sure.
is, so we know what you want to stop.
One of our postal service representatives, also one of our carriers, had 3 flat tires in one day out delivering mail in the county. Is that really what we want for our county mail service people? So, like you were asking, this is the slag board that was from a half-mile road. These are the items that came in slag and were picked up by Gene. Take a look at that. These are the items that are causing the flat tires. They're also being picked up and thrown into windshields, breaking windshields, making our county roads very hazardous.
So are these slag items, or are these things that are included?
In the slag. They are in with the slag.
When they dump the slag on our road, this is what we found walking our
I see. So-
one lane.
If I understand, then the problem you have here is not with slag per se, but with the stuff that's in the slag, is that right?
This
Yes.
is
Or do you
slag.
have stuff with this problem with the slag too?
This is slag.
Well, okay, that's stuff that's in the slag, but I don't think a bolt is not a waste product from a steel mill.
Okay, but like, look at this.
Yes, it is.
Well,
Look at this.
Let me continue on.
Like, if
We
I
can
find
ask
red
questions
rubber
later,
on a hot
okay?
dog, that's not part of the hot dog thing.
Okay. I actually stopped at where the slag was.
Okay.
And I took a magnet, and those kind of on wheels that are about this wide. I took it and rolled it the length of my pickup. That's what it picked up, and I think if I would've gone through there a second time, I would've done the magnet pull again. And I'll pass this around.
Yeah, great. This is up at Harpsco's mixing place?
No, this is out on a county road.
Okay, so this is
In
off.
front of your house, Doug?
No, I don't have slag on my road. Right, Scott?
What section of road did this come from?
This came over by Darryl Sawassing's house.
Okay, on Vale.
Yep.
Okay.
And this came from Green Avenue by West Liberty, which is less than half mile.
Do you mind if I mark this Vale Avenue so we have an
that we
idea?
lit
Sure.
off.
Say that again? I'm sorry.
This came from Green Avenue in West Liberty, Iowa, which is the half mile, one lane, dead end road that we live on after slag was put on.
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, at this time, I'd also like to present you with a petition to stop the use of slag. I have somewhere between 650 and 700 names on these. They were not solicited, they came to us and wanted to sign the petition. So I'll give you this as a copy, I've got the originals, so you can have a copy. These are names from within Muscatine County.
Okay.
So as you can see, there's a lot of people that are a little disgruntled with the use of slag. The Iowa DOT has specifications on the use of slag. The slag size is supposed to be less than a half an inch. As you can see, some of these are a lot larger than a half inch. It's only used as asphalt friction aggregate, not for surfaces on roads. Never used as a free aggregate gravel on any project. These are the Iowa DOT specifications. All slag used requires a contract specification, size, and quality, which I'd like to see your contract on that. And does the county slag contract follow the Iowa DOT guidelines? So I'd like to know that too. Road maintenance in our area is a joke. And the reason I say that, if you go to other counties around us, Louisa, Washington, Cedar County, they have great roads. Ours are a joke. We have a secondary ditch running down the middle of our roads. And it's causing lots of hazards. Even in my area, after a strong rain, the water does not run off the road, it runs down the road, and we cut ditches down the road. I tried to pass somebody the other day on the road, and I had to get down in that other secondary ditch in order to pass them, which is very hazardous. And if we got young people driving those roads, they may not be able to handle that. So I would suggest you go out and travel some of our roads, then go up to these other counties and look at their gravel roads. So the other question I've got is, have you guys kept any records of the added cost, the wear and tear, due to the use of slag? Do you guys have any of that? We'd like a copy of those records. And this cost, that should include extra tires. When I talk tires, when I look at my tires, I've gone from 40,000 miles down to 30. I travel the county a lot because I do seed sales. So my tires have cut 25%. And a $250 tire, that's a lot of money. It's costing me a lot of money. You're trying to save money, but you're pushing it back on the county residents. Also, the grader scarification blades, I've been told that they can run 17 minutes and they're gone. So there's added cost there. Are you guys figuring that into the cost of the slag? Pickup truck brakes and brake drum repairs, you know, if the slag gets in them, it tears them up, the dust from the slag. Also the dump truck brakes and brake drum repairs. And CJ Ryan, I'm sure he's having problems with the county sheriff's department. They travel the gravel roads a lot. I'm sure they're seeing a lot more wear on their tires and also their brakes and everything on those vehicles. And then the other one is school buses. What kind of issues is the school district seeing on the use of slag in those areas? It's dangerous. It's just plain dangerous. So there we go. So I'll pass out these questions, and then these are the ones we want you to answer. And I do have like to see that answer by the at least postmarked by the Friday. Scott, you know where I live. If you want to deliver it, that's fine too.
I drive by your house all the time.
I know.
Yes, sir.
So I got one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the next person. So on Monday, August 22nd, 2011, Jeff Sorensen, you asked for the MSDS, now it's called the SDS, sheets for slag. Did you ever get one?
I believe we've seen them. I don't, specifically, do I recall? No, Doug, I
That's
don't
clear
remember.
back to 2011. I
It's
know
been a
that's,
while. Been a little water under
yeah,
the
that's
bridge.
quite a ways back. Did any of the statements raise a red flag to you? when you read that MSDS sheet? And maybe any of you. Well, there are a few, so I'm gonna turn it over to Daryl, and he's gonna go through a few items here.
Thank you. In the essence of time, what he's handing out is I've been called a lot of things, don't worry about it.
Just your real name's fine.
In the essence of time, he's handing out some MSDS sheets and a key notes of slag. And the reason I put the key notes of slag on there, in case you pull the rug out of me for time, why you still have the information. And you may think I'm an environmental wacko or a health nut, but you can look at my physique and see that I'm not a health nut. And my history, I'm a farmer, been a farmer in Muscatine County all my life. I worked 16 years while farming at a chemical, fertilizer, and feed retail plant. I served on the hospital board for 8 years, was elected and served on it. Had a case go all the way to the Supreme Court of Iowa while I was on it. And I've had 6 months of chemotherapy, and I wouldn't wish it on a dead dog. So it gives me a little perspective that maybe some people don't have. The safety data sheets that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to the parent company where it essentially comes from. And you'll see some yellow markings on it, and that is what I highlighted it, so it makes it a little simple for us to look at and talk about. One of the key things when you start out, very first page, the EAF, which is electronic arc furnace slag, is considered a hazardous material. And I'm not going to go through everything on it. It's too boring, too scientific, but it's pertinent. Don't ever misunderstand that. On page 3, if this material, and this is at the plant, granted not on the road, but it gives you kind of a thought of what the process is. If this material is in a dry state, avoid inhalation of the dust. And a little further down, fine dust materials may be removed by vacuuming or wet sweeping methods to prevent spreading of the dust. And this is kind of what I find interesting. Do not release into sewers or waterways. Well, wait a minute. Where do all the roads drain? They all drain to a ditch and to a waterway. I mean, it's inherent. You don't want water on the road. So I find that a little interesting. And this talks about PPE, which is personal protective equipment needed. And I'm not going to go through that. It talks about some masks and some things and eye protection. Then it talks about the elements that are in it. And for ease and time, it's essentially heavy metals and silicon dioxide. And the silicon dioxide is very irritant to the lungs. Just a high exposure can irritate the lungs, and continued exposure, and I don't know what continued is, that's a time, can cause lung cancer. So I think those are some issues we need to consider. And then, it's about the very last, or third from last page, there's a statement here. Please note this information is for EAF, electronic arc furnace slag, is in its original form. Any altercation can void this information. So when you or whoever gets it from the retailer of it, this is good for. But you got to think about it. You're putting it on a county road that goes, and it's a porous, somewhat porous product. It freezes, it thaws. It's run over and crushed by vehicles and traffic. It's sheared and scraped and rolled with a grater blade. And you've changed the form. You've ground it, you've made it smaller, and you've made more dust particles.
Daryl, I'm sorry, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm looking at the carcinogenicity on page 5 of 5 on this report you've given us. And it looks to me like the two items that, there's no information on the slide as a whole, but the two items that are found to be potentially carcinogenous are iron oxide and silicon dioxide. Is that
Yes.
consistent? So that's rust and sand?
I'm not a scientist, I'm not gonna, I'm just,
Okay.
right, well, we have a gentleman can maybe answer it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm not a
No,
science either, I'm trying to figure this
I'm a
out.
PhD chemist. I have 35 years plus in this area.
Awesome.
Okay, silicon dioxide, depending on the size of it, It's not just sand. You can buy powdered silicon dioxide. This is produced as a amorphous, fluffy material as it comes out of the furnace. It floats on top. They scrape it off. They send it over to Harcross's site. It's sized out to different sizes, and it's in clumps. But if you grind those clumps up, it forms a nice fine powder.
So the stuff you're worried about more is not the chunks, but the powder?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
And the iron oxide?
The iron oxide's the same thing. Yeah, it's rust, but if you grind rust up and snort some of it,
Probably not a great idea.
it's not a great idea at all.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, sir.
May I get your name, please?
Yes, Edward Askew. And if you want to put doctor in front of it, that's fine also.
All right, thank you.
Now I'd like to proceed a little bit. I'm not gonna spend any more time on that because you have it in front of you and can view it. But when I was in the fertilizer and chemical industry, when we sprayed a field, if the spray blew onto a neighboring or adjacent property, the State Department of Agriculture could be called in and they'd test, and they'd call that off-target application, and you are liable for it. I mean, you have to pay the damages and could be fined. Now, I find it interesting that you've changed the form of slag, not intentionally, but we all know what's happened through the weathering process. And now you're putting a hazardous waste material on public land, and it's blowing off target onto private land. And or it is eroding down the ditches into the creeks and being an off-target application that way too. So, and I in no mean do I mean to be a threat here when I talk about these next items. I'm not threatening you or anything, but I just want to express the exposure or risk I think Muscatine County has. This is going to be, and you say, well, can you prove it? It's going to be really easy to prove. Anybody that's been a farmer or an agriculturalist, agronomist, knows that when you lime a field, which is a soil additive, which is good for the soil, it's a much higher concentration next to a gravel road than it is away from the gravel road. I mean, that's just kind of a given and can be proved quite easily. Well, the same tests that test lime, the same soil testing companies like Midwest Lab, which is an independent lab, can test for all these heavy metals. So it will be extremely easy to prove and correlate it, just like lime distribution from the fence to the other end of the field. So I guess my question is, have you provided any SDS sheets to the public? And you say, oh, they're available down here, and we aren't selling it. You know, SDS sheets are typically required by OSHA for employee safety and for first responders for safety on how to, any actions, what to do. But, and they're usually provided to the buyer of their product. Well, here you are providing us with hazardous materials, heavy metals, whatever you want to call it, delivered to our private property with no SDS sheets. And so not only does it get down, to take it a little step further, say it starts happening in residential yards, and some child, maybe immune deficiency, maybe not, somehow has continued exposure to it. Have you provided them with? No. I mean, you haven't even thought about it, I don't think. And then take it one more step further in that scenario. All the school buses that drive up and down the road, they do not have air conditioning. So twice a day, the kids are on the bus with the dust on the gravel roads. Twice a day, 5 days a week, 8 months of the year. But you say, oh no, the windows aren't open in the winter. Correct. But the ventilation system is still drawing in. So I think the exposure for a lawsuit to our county is horrendous. Just terrible. Then think of your county employees. And I don't know if you provide SDS sheets to all your employees. And if you have them sign off on them, that they received them. And are you providing PPE protective equipment to them when running, like the road graders and the different machines that you have. Then there is the possibility of a class action lawsuit. And I'm not threatening, I mean, whether a bunch of people get together or a school district. And when you think about school district, it's just not Muscatine School District. It's all the adjoining counties that somewhat drive into Muscatine to turn around or something. So exposure is in other school districts yet too. And then the possibility of a class action lawsuit. If people just get fed up and you choose to do nothing, there could be a problem. And from being on that hospital board, I learned one thing. If the county is sued, it's gonna cost us as the taxpayers, and I know you have some insurance, and I know you have directors and officers insurance. But directors, there's a clause in most director and officers insurance, is unless you do something illegal or unlawful. And I question whether putting hazardous waste on a public road that's drifting onto private property or into school buses is unlawful. I think, and the EPA or OSHA or somebody would have to determine that, but if that is, you could also be liable as individuals. And there's a lawyer there, and you may have more input, and I don't know, I'm just saying the possibility exists. And then have you informed your liability carrier of your general liability for the county that you're using a hazardous waste on public property that's drifting to private? Because you may be null and void there, your rate may go up. I just think there's so much risk to the county or us as taxpayers that it's insane to save money here to pay Peter down the road. So I encourage you to suspend the use of slag immediately and see if you can remediate this problem.
I have a question for you
Yeah,
here.
I don't know if I can answer
And
it.
I don't mean to be argumentative, but everybody in this room probably knows where the slag comes from at Harsco on the northwest corner up there.
Mhm.
Why would the state even allow that to be stored outside?
That's a good question.
I can answer that. If you look at the aerial view of that material, there are collection pits and ponds that are basically downflow from runoff. They're required to have that, and they're required to have a stormwater permit under the Federal Clean Water Act to collect that water. As for the dust and material, that's a question that's probably been brought up by the state with them, and I don't know how they've set up monitoring outside the perimeter. That would be something to ask the state. And I will tell you, I've dealt with the state, I've dealt with EPA, like I said, for 35 years. They're not always the sharpest tool in the shed on catching this stuff, because the air people at Iowa DNR are in a completely different building than the solid waste people, and the solid waste people are downstairs in the Wallace building from the Clean Water Act people. So, but they at least are enforcing the runoff rules, because you can see these colored collection ponds, and they're not clear water, they're bluish. I mean, they've got a lot of metals dissolved in them because they're not the normal color of a pond. They have those stormwater collection pools around their piles, so that's, at least they've met the Clean Water Act part.
Well, my point on this is, and I've been on that property a lot, I've been on the Dipsco property a lot, all of it. And my point being is, where that yard is set up, you know, it slopes to the north as well, and that drainage that runs down through there where Kenny Renner runs those red cattle down through that bottom, and this is all about, as a crow fly, well, I'll say 5 miles. From that point to the river, but it goes in that drainage down to Pine Creek and down into the Mississippi then. And I just can't imagine something this toxic that the state would allow to run into the Mississippi River like this.
I can't either, but has anybody tested?
You know, and you talk about, you know, I don't know if you've been up there when they're running, which I've been there many times and many hours and watched it run through my travels up there. And you talk about the dust, Daryl. So anytime you'd have a southerly breeze, it would carry that to the north, and the easterly wind to take it to the west into all that pasture ground and that down through there. I just can't imagine how that's even possible with this.
Well, nobody's tested yet.
And nobody, I tell you, when they turned in their stormwater permit, they showed the drainage. If they haven't showed the drainage correctly, that's a violation of the Federal Clean Water Act. Now, I will tell you, the state does not go out and inspect stormwater runoffs regularly. They don't go to these facilities. I mean, they, as you've seen, the way they catch, we'll just take an akin thing, manure lagoons overfilling. The way they catch them when they overfill is when they get fish kills. That's how they show up and catch them. So I will tell you, the people in Field Office 6 do not regularly go out and go to these properties and look for this. This would be something to point out to them, and I'll tell you what, after listening to you, I'm going to, when I get home this afternoon, call up basically the Field Office Coordinator at Field Office 6 and inform her, and I'll call up Eric Wicklund, who's in charge of the NPDS program up at Des Moines, and inform him that there is runoff that's not being contained because the, just listening to the Board of Supervisors here, there have been visual observations that there is runoff that is not being contained.
It doesn't, the runoff could be absolutely perfect. It could be absolutely perfect. How long's that steel mill been there? 30 years? Doesn't matter about them. Can you imagine the amount of tons of dust that have traveled?
Well,
If
sir,
the runoff's perfect.
well, I will just say that that has not been brought up to the state, and the state does not enforce actively on these things. They
I
have
understand,
argued-
but as Daryl's
Yeah.
speaking that, I think about different things.
Yeah,
you
but
know, because
my
I've been
point
involved
being,
with
nobody's tested for it. I mean, it's not like a normal soil test. You don't test for the heavy metals.
Right.
I think it's a matter of if people start testing, and it's gonna start showing up.
Right.
And that's when the ball of wax gets, or it's gonna be a problem.
Errol, I'd like to
Sure.
just put something out here, because, again, just like you're saying, nobody's upset with
Yeah.
anybody here. We're all trying to get something resolved in our minds. But there was an implication in my mind that I thought was wrong. And that is, the implication was that maybe this board, when it came before us regarding the use of slag, maybe did not do diligence. So I was here. I want to explain that process a little bit. We had a fella that has local property, and he was concerned about those issues, including the dust and so on. Yeah, some of you folks were here then, and you know who we're talking about. So I took it very seriously, as the rest of the board did, to make sure that we did what we could do to know whether or not, if we allowed the use, which was recommended by our county engineer, and I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but he's looking at ways we could save money and save the taxpayer. But we were very cautious. We dealt with this for over 2 years before we thought, okay, we've checked all the boxes. I've got paperwork here because I kind of spearheaded a lot of that. I think I was the most concerned possibly because this individual was an old friend of mine, and I wanted to make sure that we were looking at it properly. And we didn't get any MSDS sheets. When we requested, I have paperwork here from the federal government in Atlanta regarding this whole issue, whether we should or should not use slag, how good or bad it was. Nobody, and I asked for it, nobody ever offered an MSDS. We also have, I have information for the State Hygienic Laboratory. That was in 2012. So we were, you can see this is a span of 4 years.
Yeah.
We really went through this trying to get the proper answer.
But there's a,
I'm not out to hurt
No.
any of our friends and farmers or any of our citizens, because it affects everybody. My goal has always been to try to work with and help the taxpayer to get the best bang for their buck. As far as these larger pieces and things like that, we were assured over and over again that anything coming out of the furnaces couldn't come out like that. That doesn't mean it's not in there, you know. And we even went to the extent where, you know, we were told that the folks working for the engineer's office that picked this up had kind of a routine to go through to see if they spotted anything. So I'm not arguing whether this exists or don't exist. What I'm kind of arguing about is we did due diligence and we worked with the information that come back to us.
well, and one of the things, I've seen some history of that, and one of the things that was presented to you at that time, I believe, was that a coal-fired slag. And coal fire slag is different from electric arc furnace
Well, you
slag.
used the term, I think it was EAF or something.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
That, they used
Okay,
that
I didn't
term in
know,
here.
but I know there was the Department of, or DOT or the Department of Health had some coal firing slag reports going around that were somewhat being used, but
Okay.
there is a difference between the two.
Well, that's not what they
Yeah,
addressed.
okay, that's fine. I
And
just
on
wanted
top
to.
of that, I even have one report in here somewhere in this pile of paperwork where it's recommended usage for the surfacing of gravel roads.
By who?
That's by the feds. EPA.
I will answer that part is, EPA says if you use it, it must be equal to or superior to the aggregate you are replacing. And if you get flat tires from it, and I'll tell you, I talked to the District 6 head engineer, the District 5 head engineer, the District 6 materials engineer for the Iowa DOT. They flat out said they would never ever use it as open aggregate.
I think, I'm not denying what you're saying. I know those fellas.
Yeah.
But I would say, and this is kind of, Darryl, what you hinted to earlier, I think there's been a transition on this product
Well, there has
that we
been.
really haven't acknowledged, seen.
I don't think it's gotten
So this is a
better.
benefit to all the county residents, you folks coming here today and bringing this up.
Well, are you saying it's being used as an open aggregate on the county road?
No,
or
it
is
is-
a mix?
But the thing
No,
is, they said they would
which
never,
part?
they'd never use it.
As an open aggregate, but is it, because I don't know, is it being used as an open aggregate here to your knowledge?
Well, if you're mixing it with gravel, you still are using it as an open aggregate. What they said is the only way they would use it is contain it in asphalt.
See, that's a total change from what they said.
Well,
What I have in this report is to use it as a surface and not as a necessarily
right.
part of.
And I think people have gotten burned. I think DOT has gotten burned, you know, and they've said, because I looked at the Google Earth aerial of the Harcross site up there, and I noticed there are different grading areas. They have different conveyors, and they're, looks like they're going to different screens and different grading.
For sizing.
For sizing, right. What pile are we getting our stuff from compared to what pile does Iowa DOT accept? Because DOT will accept it. They have it listed as a acceptable, a company called Blackheart as an acceptable provider, not Harcross, but Blackheart. So then Blackheart must just spec out Harcross's stuff. But they said the only way they use it is to mix with asphalt. And the only way you would see it as an open aggregate on the shoulders, side shoulders, you know, gravel shoulders on a DOT highway, is if it was crushed, recycled asphalt that was being put down, so it still contains. But when I pointed out I asked the head engineer, I said, okay, we're talking about equal or better. I said, if it contains anything in it that causes excessive wear of tires and flat tires, would that be acceptable? And flat out was no, and it would not be acceptable.
Right.
Yeah, well, but they said, we wouldn't accept
But
it.
isn't that like saying, if this causes excessive risk, should we put it out?
No, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Just trying
seeing
to figure
this
out, yeah.
and such, I asked them,
So I assume you're then familiar with, as I'm not, with the slag production process.
yes,
So at a certain point, it gets ground down into various sizes, and those
Not
sizes.
always.
No, but the sizes, so some are ground down, and
well,
then
see,
some are not?
basically what I've seen is slag, and this is at Sevier Steel up in Bettendorf. I've inspected their facility, and they are an electronic arc furnace. So you load it up with your material that you're going to melt. You stick the electrodes down into it, you apply electricity, and you get heat. Some things float. And that's how you can get things that look like washers and bolts and things. They float up in the slag because they aren't kept down by weight to melt. And see, they're adding other constituents in there to make slag. And what slag is trying to soak everything out they don't want in the steel because it's recycled.
Right.
So if you really had true slag, probably wouldn't have an issue, right?
If we had true slag and you guys were using it for a mix with asphalt or as an underlayment with concrete on top, I'd say okay. But if you're gonna add it to where, it's just like lime dust on the road. Yeah, I gotta use lime dust here and there, but I don't wanna use it for all of my overlayment because it's just dusty.
Well, the position of the feds has always been it's inert.
Well, But the feds also require you to do a test for total metals and a test for TCLP. Now, T-clip is a measurement of how much would break down in a landfill. Well, this isn't being landfill, but that's that test. They also do total metals. Now, the total metals analysis I got from SSAB, it was done in 2004, but on their slag, contained measurable levels of chrome, measurable levels of lead, and measurable levels of copper.
So is it the SSAB slag or slag in general that has that problem?
Well, it depends on whose slag you're talking.
Also
Now-
depends on what the allowable percent is.
Well, it depends what they're making. Now, Sevier Steel made high-strength tools. They basically cast out tools. They were sent next door and they were heat-treated and they were for like railroad companies and such. People wanted specialized tools. They also had a slag pile behind their building that was over 10 stories tall and covered a city block. And they finally had to start getting rid of that slag. They shipped it on the river and sent it out. They found some place to send it to, and they shipped it out. So they saw no use in it in replacement on it. So it depends on who makes the slag and how they do to produce it. All I'm just saying is what I've gotten from SSAB, and that's the reason I sent the letter to the county engineer. I'd like to see the most current analysis, not just TCLP, not T-clip. I also want to see the total metals, because let's face it, the total metals that get washed out or get blown over and get ingested by human beings or by livestock, that's what digests in your stomach. T-clip is a weak acid extraction, like it's sitting in landfill for 20 years. It's supposed to measure how much leaches out in 20 years. It's not the same. And T-clip was developed, if you remember, the Superfund site back up in New York, not Love Canal. That's what it was developed for. So, but anyway, I ramble on. I don't want to take up your
If I could try and distill what I'm hearing, and please, everybody correct me if I'm wrong, I'm hearing problems with crap in the slag that nails your tires, all right? And you say if true slag, if true slag should not have that. So if we're true slag,
If you're buying good quality slag, no, it shouldn't have that.
all right, so true slag fixes that, might not fix the environmental issues.
Right.
You're saying. So there's environmental issues, I'm hearing runoff and dust/inhalation. Is that correct?
Inhalation and ingestion. Put that down underneath there.
Ingestion, but unless someone's going out and eating the rocks, I'm guessing they're ingesting it through.
Oh, wait
Livestock
a
and
minute,
dust.
back up, like the dust in the school bus. They don't decontaminate the school
Sure,
bus
no,
every day.
but I'm
Yeah,
just trying
yeah.
to figure out what all the issues are.
Yeah, okay,
so we
yeah,
can-
it's fine, I just wanted to clarify that.
And livestock, if you've got it on
I guess
a
they
hay
can.
field and you've cut it,
Okay.
or if it's even corn stover and you put enough molasses on it that the cows will eat it.
Put enough molasses on, I'll eat it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, and you're saying there's no testing being done in runoff or,
No.
you don't accept the testing, which is it, I'm sorry?
Well, it hasn't been done recently. We don't have anything on the runoff. And as for the other, it's, well, the one I got was done in 2004, so it's 14 years ago.
And so we need,
And the earlier position was just so many feet away from the waterway,
Right.
you know, that's all they had.
so you're saying some kind of testing on runoff?
Well, it's gotta be tested for runoff. And let's put it this way, you gotta have a contract in place with this company. If the engineer doesn't have it, you better have one that says, oh, by the way, we don't want any of that. We're gonna buy it, we don't want any of that, none of that stuff, you know? And we want it to, of this grade, size, or better. And then, I would say the other thing is, you'd have to come up with a plan, what am I gonna use this slag for? Am I gonna use it on nothing? Okay, that's the best thing. Or I'm gonna use it to maybe stabilize embankments. That's not road surface, I'm stabilizing an embankment with it. Am I going to, spec it out if I'm going to do a white top over a blacktop area like they did on the Wilton Road, Taylor Avenue, or are we going to do something else with it? I mean, whatever the engineer's gonna have to come up with something and address all these risks, so you guys don't have to deal
Well,
with
an
it.
engineer's not environmentalist, I mean, we need.
Right.
products.
You know, but to your questions today, and to what you're bringing before our board, actually, this issue, if it all proves to be a problem, it's a much larger problem than just the county using it on the roads, because if I can believe what I'm being told by our sources, we're only getting about 20% of what they got out there. But everybody else, there's a lot of folks, businesses, individuals, farmers, people that are putting it on their own road. So it's a much bigger deal. We're using maybe 20%. We'd like to use more, but everybody else is using it, so there's not enough left over for us. So we really do. This is a much larger problem potentially.
Yeah, it is, potentially.
When they melt steel, so it's in a pot, okay, and then when it's melted and everything's mixed the way that they want it and the chemistry's right, they actually tip the pot, slag floats to the top, and so that it runs down in the pit. I used to work for the company, Harsco, that's at outside Davenport, used to be at Wilton, and I used to work for that company. So they pour it off, then as it cools, you go and clean it, take it outside. Because it's a porous product, every time we go into winter time, it rains, it takes on the water, and as soon as it freezes, expansion and contraction, it breaks. Which is why we see so much black dust on the road, which is why when they brought up the cost analysis, I haul rock, I'd love to be a part of showing the density of slag. If we put slag in my cap and weighed it, and then put road rock in my cap and weighed it, the density of slag is far greater than that of rock. So it doesn't go as far. When they take this slag and they pour it on the ground and then you pick it up and take it outside, unless they have a shortage of product, they don't crush it, they just screen it. So the fines go through screens. How do they get the metals out? There's a magnet on the end pulley on the conveyor. If the piece of slag weighs more than the piece of steel that's hanging up with it, it's gonna go in the slag pile. If the piece of steel weighs more, then that magnet on the head pulley is gonna throw it back where it's reclaimed that. So that's a fine line of, they're always gonna have a percentage of steel in there because it's just mathematics.
And how long ago has it been since you worked there?
I was there 28 years ago. It's still an electric arc furnace.
Well, I understand that, but we talk about how all the
Changes.
requirements and changes, you wonder even where that process is today. So that's what I'm saying.
Yep, you bet.
I feel like we gotta dig back into it and learn.
And it's the dust. I think our greatest I mean, this is the flat tires and the steel in it. No one can tell you it's gonna be zero. No one, because of what I just explained with that's how they get the metals out of it, because they actually sell the metal back to the steel mill. Their goal is to get it out of there,
Sure.
but you can't get 100% of it. But it's the dust that's being created from the freeze-thaw cycles, which is greater going into the winter, because anytime it's wet, and then it takes on the moisture and it freezes, your half-inch product just became 2 quarter-inch pieces. And the math just keeps going down, so then
Yeah,
it
it
goes
all
down
makes
to
common
dust.
sense what you're saying, because very few things, if any, are 100%.
Yep.
So you're gonna have issues.
And then that cost savings, that's the other thing, I'll come in on my own time and to know how much are you paying for it, how much are you paying for the truck, and what are you paying for the rock?
Yeah.
We
The
have
spread's big, but somebody's gotta do the math on the differential.
Yep.
Anything else, Darryl?
No, not unless you have anything else.
We're past our 30-minute time frame that I was gonna
Well,
allow.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for not pulling the rug out.
What if we had one of them canes with the hook on it?
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Very informative. You bet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we're gonna move forward with our agenda.
We'll take a strong look at it, I promise.
Don't think so much of giving everybody better salaries. Pay attention to this.
They aren't mixing this gravel. Unless they talk about the gravel mixing with the slag, they dump solid slag down through there a lot of times. And if they're mixing with the gravel, there ain't much gravel left. And all this is slag on top. You're like putting marbles on top of the gravel. It's on 152nd Street, he graded that on a Friday. 1 day later, the solid washboard is that deep down through there. He grades it usually grades it on Friday. 2 days later, it's solid water.
All right, one thing I would like to say, you asked if it was what street it was on. That metal's in every street, wherever they put slag, it's there. And I had a $20 flat tire on a 2-week-old tire. I paid for it myself. I dropped the slag off, the piece of slag, at the county engineer's office. This was a year ago in July. I stood the $20. If it goes in a $1,500 combine tire, I'm gonna be coming in. You approved claims at the first thing. I'm gonna be putting a claim in for that $1,500 combine tire. Just so you know that. And I think that maybe some of the people here, when you start getting overrun with claims for wrecking the tire for a product you put on the thing, maybe you'll think twice about it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Here's my sizes. This one cost me $135 tire. You see them? And that was on the Muscatine Cedar County line. And all we have to do is drive a quarter-mile left out our driveway, and we're in Cedar County. We're on the county line where Cedar County maintains it, completely different kind of road. Turn left, we're in Cedar County, beautiful. Nice crown, runs down into the ditch, there's the secondary ditch, all gravel, very well maintained.
He is.
Okay.
Sir, do you have a card? Yes. I'm a horrible consultant. I should have been handing those suckers out immediately.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, well, you know, being a horrible consultant, there you go. Yeah, everybody.
Oh, I have one.
The reason my dogs, my mother-in-law Willoughby lives on the gravel road, and my wife Pam drives and sees her every other day. So I'll be the one dealing with her flat.
Sure.
Okay.
Could you email us?
I think we can get a copy of that card.
How do I do it? Do you guys?
Do his board of
Yeah,
supervisors.
go to the website, and we'll give you our county website, and we'll show you right on email.
I'll give you some key points, questions to ask, and some tests maybe.
That'll get to all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
Number 7, items with planning and zoning administrator Eric Furnace. Morning, Eric.
Morning.
A, review and possible action to accept the variance granted by the Muscatine County Board of Adjustment on November 2nd, 2018.
Had one variance that was granted for residents in Cranston. It was simply to allow the property owner to build a carport 10 feet from the front lot line instead of required 35 feet, which is the normal setback for the R2. This was unanimously approved by the Board of Adjustment simply because the Cranston area, this is very typical. This is the nature of those lots that were laid out, you know, thinking that someday that would be a town. The carport would not extend any farther towards the road than the existing house, which was just given the same variance to be rebuilt after a total loss fire. So just a variance on a front lot line. Really not any other usable space on the lot, so very boilerplate variance.
Motion by Nathan, second by Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. B, discussion and possible action to approve resolution 1105-1801, approval of the combined preliminary and final plat of Deere's second edition.
This is a one-lot agricultural subdivision that was just simply necessary because there had been a previous split of the quarter section. One of the family members is buying the existing farmhouse and some of the outbuildings and just wanted to transfer that into their name. So one-lot agricultural subdivision, there's an existing house. All the property of this lot and the contiguous farm ground remains Zone A1, so no additional development can occur. It was just simply to be able to achieve splitting off the farmhouse from the farm.
Okay.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Jeff. Second by Matt. This is a roll call vote. Jeff?
Aye.
Matt? Aye. Bob?
Aye.
Nathan? And I vote aye. Motion passes. Okay, anything else, Eric?
Just real quick, did receive a few phone calls following last week's meeting on floodplain questions. Haven't heard anything back from the DNR. They're looking into the issues that I brought to their attention on the properties that were losing their lomas. So I'll be following up this week to see if it, you know, where they're at on that. But,
All right, thank you for that article.
so, that's it.
All right. Very good, thanks, Eric. Number 8, departmental update with Community Service Director Kathy Anderson-Knoll. Morning, Kathy.
Good morning. All right. Well, in your packet, you know, we've got an overview of our financials at the end of September of fiscal year 19, so September 2018. For our mental health expenditures, we have spent $342,344.12, and so we're at 20.21%. We did receive our first quarterly payment from the region of $190,202.50. As far as our general assistance budget, we are at 25.26% with our year-to-date of expenditures of $115,629. And budget-wise, you know, we're working into budget season here, so we want to probably start thinking about our per capita for the upcoming year. The region has scheduled 2 strategic planning sessions for December, and I think Nathan's probably talked a little bit to you about those. As a region, we've also been looking at our costs per capita and the services that each of the counties in the region is funding and what our differences are. So there'll be a report to the governing board on that in November. You know, as we know, we have our trust program. That's a very strong program, and our funding of that program is something that not all of those counties support to the level that we do. You know, we're currently in our trust program, we're serving 231 active cases, and that's a combination of guardianship, conservatorship, and payeeships. Currently, we're working on 3 referrals, and we're just very, very busy. Our caseloads are high for our 2 trust social workers. I have one who's at about 130 cases, and my other one is about 96. So we're working on, looking at what we can do strategically in conjunction with the region to make sure that we can serve as many people as we're getting referrals for. Because the referrals keep coming, so that'll be part of strategic planning discussions and advocating for Muscatine to be a strong provider in that area, because the other counties do some, but not to the extent that we're doing it, and people are looking to us to be the leader in that area. My 2 trust social workers attended a statewide training for guardianship in October that was sponsored by the Office of Public Decision Making, and so we're looking at them for some technical advice on our program, and do we need to expand this program, beef this up? We follow the National Guardianship Association guidelines, and Social Security has always been very pleased with our work, so we're looking to strengthen that program and see how we can function in the region, and perhaps be able to have the region fund some of those services too, and that's part of our strategic planning discussion. In terms of the region, we've been very busy with working on strategic planning, looking at the financials, having discussions on, legislatively, what are the priorities? And one of the big priorities legislatively is going to be funding of the mental health system. Because as everybody in our region, we're capped at 3078 for a levy. So in order to continue to fund services, we have to be thinking about how that looks for the region. you know, and going into fiscal year 20, starting to plan for fiscal year 20, you know, we want to make sure that everybody's talking and everybody's looking at what the big picture is, because we know that we have to spend down to our fund balance. Our fund balance at the end of 2020 has to be below 25%. We're going to be there. You know, we've had to draw money down from the region this year, you know, to meet our projected expenditures for the services that we're currently providing. So part of the discussion that we'll be having at strategic planning time is looking at the services that maybe each county does a little differently, and what's going to be important, what does the governing board with input from their boards of supervisors, what services are important, what services do we want continued, and how do we want that to look. You know, one of the things, our trust program, you know, we do it a little differently than everyone else does. We do it more in terms of the guardianship and conservatorships than anybody else does. You know, Scott County has a fairly large payee program, but again, they run theirs a little differently than we do. We provide more of a one-on-one service, more of a direct service to our folks in terms of working with them on their budgeting, you know, working with them to be flexible.
Drop me an email, Kathy, and let me know why ours is better.
Okay, I will.
I could use that information.
Yes, okay, I certainly will. In terms of mental health, you know, our commitment numbers are still looking pretty high. In September, we had 21 commitments. 15 were mental health, 4 were substance, 2 were duals. And of those commitments, 5 were hospitalized out of the region. So 2 went to St. Luke's, which that's a neighboring county, so neighboring to the region. But we had 1 go to Mercy in Mason City, 2 went to Council Bluffs, and then 3 were able to go to Trinity Rock Island. In October, we had 14. And so 11 of those were mental health, 2 dual, which is mental health and substance, and then 1 substance. So we had 1 that went clear to Council Bluffs and 1 that went to Sioux City. Again, that's because, you know, there's not a bed available within the region. But we did have 4 that were able to go to Robert Young in Rock Island. So the ability to go to Robert Young in Rock Island is benefiting us, you know, because we're saving money in transportation costs. But anytime we have to take people over to Sioux City, Council Bluffs, Mason City, you know, that just adds to our transportation costs for commitments. It's not the best case scenario for the person that's under that commitment.
What's Robert Young's capacity, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get you that information.
You know, I don't know if they've got any plans to expand capacity in the near term.
I don't know. Right now, a lot of the emphasis is on what can be done in an outpatient type services to avoid a commitment. You know, we've talked within the region, we're still waiting for some of those positions to be filled for Muscatine County, and one of the plans is having a pre-screening available for folks that are filing commitment. They will be offered the chance to meet with a mental health professional, a licensed person that can do a mental health screening assessment. And then, you know, at the end of the day, it's still up to the people that are filing the commitment if they want to continue. But just having that layer for pre-screening may divert some commitments, because we know, you know, folks often head to the courthouse when they're at their wits' end, you know, about someone, and they're very worried about the person's safety. So if, you know, there could be a little more reassurance that, okay, we can meet with this person, we can do an assessment. You know, you can never 100% rule out that somebody is going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. But, you know, getting some services in place, saying, okay, we can get you in to see a therapist tomorrow. We can get you in to see a therapist or a doctor in 2 weeks. You know, that may eliminate or lessen the need for hospitalization.
Do we track involuntary versus voluntary?
We're only tracking involuntary commitments now. Robert Young is tracking the number of telehealth assessments that they do, and not all of those end up with a commitment. And for the month of September, which in your packet the number of assessments that were done via telehealth with Robert Young, I believe, was 32. And we're also still, the winner for the assessment, for the provider bridge appointment. Everybody that has been scheduled for a provider bridge appointment has attended those appointments. So that's a really good thing. And those provider bridge appointments, what those are when a person, you know, is coming out of the hospital, jail, they can't get in to see their provider, they have maybe burned a bridge with their provider, the person that's prescribing their mental health medications. You know, they can contact, or someone can make a referral for them to be seen through the provider bridge appointment with a health evaluation, and they can be prescribed 30 days of medications, which we know that when folks get off their medications, that's often when we have a lot of trouble. You know, that's when we see people that are getting committed, that's when we see people that are breaking the law, and all those things. So, you know, that has been a very good plus for our region, and I'm glad that we're utilizing them, and you know, we're showing good follow-through with them, because the more they're used, you know, we could have more open up in the future. The other thing that's also happened with mental health in the past month has been the opening of the peer-run respite house in DeWitt, Iowa. Now it's in DeWitt, it's not here, but what it is it's a place that somebody that's having a mental health crisis or issue they can go and they can stay up to 3 days, and just, it's all staffed by peers, people that have lived experience with mental health, and just have a chance to kind of reset. It's Life Connections is the provider. That was one of the providers that the region provided a one-time funding grant to get this house up and running. It's called Rhonda's House. It's named in honor of Rhonda Schaus, who was a strong advocate in our state for mental health services. And we had the opportunity to tour the house, you know, several months ago before it was finished, before it opened, with Todd Nowak out of Life Connections in DeWitt. Life Connections also runs a peer-run respite drop-in center for folks with mental illness in DeWitt. And they do a variety of activities. They do some, you know, peer one-on-one counseling to help people. Okay. Other things in mental health that are coming down the pike, there's some discussion about the children's system. And right now, you know, the regions are responsible for funding the adult system, not the children's system. But we all know that children grow up to be adults, and children who are experiencing mental health challenges often grow up to be adults with mental health challenges. So, you know, the question is, where do regions see themselves? Where do counties see themselves? And, you know, the legislature is taking a look at developing, you know, this is one of the governor's priorities, is the development of a children's mental health system. Unfortunately, there's not a funding stream associated with that. So, you know, that's kind of the famous story, is what's our involvement, what's our concern, and then what's our responsibility as a region for providing services, and then how do we pay for services? So stay tuned for that.
Have you heard any updates, Kathy, on legislative efforts to solve the funding issues for the current region system?
Okay, for the current region system, you know, there's some discussion, and of course they're not in session now, but they're having committee meetings, and I know that Representative Carlson is on one of those committees. Lori Elam is also on the legislative committee for ISAC, so she's having some input for things. You know, there's some discussion about repealing Senate File 504, which is the legislation which has, you know, set those fund balance requirements for the regions. And, you know, Senate File, wasn't 504, it was the one before that, but, you know, that set the levy caps.
I don't think that they did necessarily everything wrong with that I think 504 went too far by making those fund balance caps too aggressive. They were too short-term.
That-
They didn't give
yeah.
us long-term ability to
Right.
get, to work down those fund balances in a more sane manner. instead
I
of
would
just-
agree. You know, we all know that when we're developing new services, no matter what they are, it takes time because you've got to find providers that are qualified to provide the service. You have to, you know, the legislature has to write the rules and, you know, there has to be some kind of order to it. And I think you're absolutely right, Jeff, you know, by saying that we had to do this by 2020. A lot of regions were just kind of in a panic mode. And then we get the next set of legislation, you know, House File 2456 that mandated a lot of new core services that the regions had to provide, you know, including the access centers, the ACT program, crisis stabilization. And, you know, all those things are in the works. But, you know, they do take time and, you know, most of it will not be up and running until well into 2020 and maybe a little bit beyond. Last week, we had the opportunity to tour a crisis stabilization step-down subacute facility up at Hillcrest in Dubuque. Now, what they've done is they've taken their old residential care facility and designated several beds for that service. And what crisis subacute is when somebody has been hospitalized, they're not necessarily ready to go back to the community, but they don't need full-time hospitalization. So the subacute is a step down from that, but still a step up from going home. And some people need, you know, a couple of weeks to make sure the changes in medication are working, just to make sure that things are on an even keel, allow, you know, a case manager or IHH care coordinator to set up the needed services that they need to be successful in the community, because we all know these things take time. And if you're looking at most hospitalizations are 3 to 5 days. If it's a commitment, you know, they're hospitalized for 72 hours, and, you know, then it's determined whether they're gonna be discharged back home, if they need to continue outpatient treatment, or if they have to go back to the hospital. It's fairly rare that folks go back to the hospital. They still have to exhibit that criteria of being a danger to themselves or others, because that's the criteria they use for most hospitalizations.
Got a question for you. It's kind of an open thing here.
Okay.
But I want to hear your opinion of the current condition of the healthcare in Muscatine County for those areas that you're directly involved with.
Okay. And when you're saying healthcare, do you mean mental health care or just healthcare in general?
In general, those
In
that
general?
you're involved with.
Okay, all right. You know, I think in Muscatine County, we've got some very good options for accessing healthcare. You know, we've got Unity Point, and we've got the university still. I know that Mercy Medical's recently pulled out of Muscatine. Or not Mercy, I'm sorry, Genesis was the one that pulled out of Muscatine. And I have not had people coming into my office saying that they can't get in to see a primary care provider. I think Unity Point's, you know, urgent care has helped people, you know, be able to get in, get things taken care of rather than going to the emergency room.
Well, I know there's still a problem with some people getting a doctor.
Okay, is there?
The problem hasn't gone away.
Okay, I haven't heard that, but, you know, I just haven't heard that. But if that's, you know, if they're not able to get a doctor, then it's obviously still a problem.
Yeah, and I think it's more, my impression of it is it's more about the entities like the Unities of the world. I mean,
Okay.
they're not, I'm not gonna say they're not all playing well together, but
Okay.
something's not quite right.
Okay, I haven't heard that. You know, in terms of mental health care, I think things have definitely gotten better with the opening of 1616 Cedar. You know, it's still a challenge to find a prescriber. And, you know, right now I know that they've got a prescriber out on leave, a medical leave. And so, you know, then you've got coverage and all of that. And they currently have 2 prescribers for the Muscatine area for mental health medications. You know, I think what we want to be able to see is people be able to get their health care locally rather than having to travel to Iowa City or Davenport. helping, having a good array of services here so that people choose to stay locally. Because that's better for everyone. And a lot of folks that I work with in my office, going out of town isn't always an option for them, just due to transportation.
For
And
those that can do it, it can be a hardship.
it can, absolutely. So I think it's whatever we can do to encourage people to keep their health care local, I think is always a good thing.
Kathy, kind of a good segue into one thing I've been thinking about lately. It's all political season again
Sure.
here, and we're hearing all the jibber jabber, the MCOs.
Yes.
Bad startup, all kinds of issues. Now, you hear a whole story that, we're gonna get rid of the MCOs and go back. Have you thought through, if that in fact happens, January legislative session, they come in and make a charge to get rid of the MCOs and go back to state-run care, how would we deal with that? We don't have case managers anymore. I'm sure most counties got rid of them. They all went to third-party entities.
Right.
That sounds great, but I'm not sure that that's a road you can go back down, is it?
I would agree. I think, basically what they did was they broke the system that we had
Right.
when, the MCOs started up. And so, yes, many counties, had to close their case management programs, or they went down to bare bones. We experienced a lot of transition and upheaval during that time as well. There isn't county-run case management anymore because the MCOs are doing it, at least not for Medicaid funded. Some have, some county social work available. We do that. We don't have a county social worker at this time, so that'd be something that we'd have to look at. We kind of do that. Some of the concerns we still have with the MCOs is I spoke a little bit about a situation we had with a provider fairly recently, and what we had, we got some assistance from Representative Carlson on that. We still kind of have a stopgap. They're okay for a few more months, but it seems like what they're doing is doing it, okay, we're okay for a few more months, now we'll be okay for a few more months, and just not working on a permanent solution between the state and the MCO and the provider.
Yeah, I'm gonna respond to you a little bit too on that, Jeff. I realize Milestone Group's different, okay, I get it. But we still take care of 17 counties in southeastern Iowa. We still have to deal with the MCOs. The Iowa Department of Elderly has done a really good job of helping us collect some monies that the MCOs kept holding back to the tune of $300,000. Now, we don't have it all back, but we've got a nice portion, and so the state did help us in trying to get that. My understanding is they're very close to or have accomplished getting the missing MCO replaced.
Yeah, they have named Centene as the MCO that's going, and I think that they're under Centene, but they have another name. Some of them have several different names, which they're going to start in fiscal year 20, is my understanding.
Yes, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to what we do here, because we do have a location for people.
Right.
But we did too, Milestones, and we were planning on renting some of that space out to maybe some other type of healthcare folks, or whatever, but we're holding on to it. We're not renting it out. It's all in the same building, because we do believe that some of this could come back.
Yeah.
And if it does, we're good to go, other than trying to hire the people back.
Well, I think, if the MCOs go away, I think what the state and the regions have to work together on is having a planful, mindful way of, getting things back up to some type of service structure that's going to work, perhaps work better than what we had before. So, it's really hard to say, Jeff. I think we've been through such a whirlwind with all these changes since 2015, even a little before that with the regionalization. And, now when we're talking about regions also being responsible for children's services, I think what has to happen is the state has to really step up to the plate and, come up with a stable funding solution for services, because that's not what we've had.
That's what really has me concerned, is that, they clawed back on these MCOs they did, and I think that wasn't even legislative action, that was administrative, right? The DHS or whoever decided to unilaterally do that.
Right.
And we weren't consulted, they did it with seniors, they did it with mental health, So you've had this, you know, shot after shot after
Right.
shot, and they have not fixed any of the funding, the underlying
No.
funding issues, and all these, and I'm fearful that the poor old property taxpayer in the county is gonna be the one footing the bill for all of
That's
these
where it's
new
gonna end.
ideas.
That's where it's
Right.
gonna
And I don't know where, I don't know where the offsetting costs come from. You know,
Right.
we've always provided these services, so where are the dollars freed up?
Exactly.
You know, if the state used to do the MCO work and now there's MCOs, and now the county's taking our capability to do that out. We don't
Yeah,
have it anymore.
yeah, we
We
don't
don't have
the
people anymore, we're gonna
capability.
have to, we'd have to rehire, restaff, retrain, and
Well,
those
if it
people go on
comes-
to other things.
If it happens like that, my gut feeling is gonna be just like that, abrupt. You're not gonna have any warning other than this guessing that maybe.
It'll be another disaster.
Well, and you also have to, you know, get your programs accredited. You know, you can't just start up a program, it has to be accredited. And what the process was prior to managed care was under Chapter 24. So, you know, you'd have to do that application process, they'd have to come in, do surveys, you know, you'd have to meet certain criteria. And my thought is if they're making a change, then they're gonna have to change, you know, the legislation and the rules to match that before they can get things up and running. You know, but, you know, we all do know that sometimes the state has been famous for rolling something out and, you know, telling people later, fixing the rules later. And, you know, people are just out here trying to swim without, you know, swim in the whirlpool without a life jacket or without a
That's why you have to
lifeline.
be so careful of what you implement or do, that's different or new, because you don't know what tomorrow's gonna bring. We're
Right.
so very cautious at what we've been doing.
Everybody's so focused on, because I think of the, let's just call it the political jibber jabber about MCOs, because I see it, the MCOs are in place to manage a system. The actual soul of the system has a lot to do with what we're able to provide. We keep getting funding caps and we keep getting more stuff thrown in our lap. The
Absolutely.
DHS isn't doing us any favors with their sleight of hand. So, you know, these politicians are playing games when those of us on the ground are trying to solve problems. You know, I wish they just leave us where we are and like let us solve the problems. We've got the MCOs now, fine, we can work within that framework if you give us the ability and the funding structure.
Right, exactly, exactly.
Well, the MCOs aren't totally happy with the kind of dollars they're getting for doing the job.
But they keep getting more.
Well, I know, and they want more, they'll keep wanting more.
Well, the problem is
They're
you've
not
got,
happy with their
an
profits.
unlimited demand and a limited supply, that's the nature of life, and, you know, so, yeah, right now, it's easy to talk about, oh, well, the MCOs are all bad.
No, they're not.
They're not, but
Yeah.
they are there to decrease costs, and any increase in cost is gonna be thrown back either in terms of increased property taxes on the local folks, or in terms of reduced services if we don't get a relief to the property tax cap.
You know, and one of the complaints that folks have about the MCOs is when services get denied or cut, you know, then folks are trying to appeal. And the process just keeps going around in a vicious circle. So I think, you know, that's a concern, of course. But really, the other thing is, you know, when we see people coming in and they say, you know, I've had 6 case managers in the last year.
Right.
You know, I think the stability, you know, the access. You know, you might be calling an 800 number to talk to somebody, and you're gonna get put through,
You've been there 3 weeks.
yeah.
That doesn't work.
So that's, you know, that's a concern. And it's not that, you know, they're trying to do their job, they're trying to do
Yeah.
what they are being, you know,
Nobody at the MCO's like, who can we kill today?
no.
No, but they are looking at where they can make a buck today. Don't give me the idea that they're all worried about,
Yeah.
folks that are going to them, because they're a job, they're a business.
Right, they're a business.
Not there.
Yeah.
It's made it pretty difficult.
And you do have, you know, you do have to be cognizant of your costs and look at things like need, you know, we have talk all the time, you know, about wants versus needs, but you gotta get your needs met.
The problem is all this stuff is top down, and when you
Yeah.
try and do anything top down, you're going to have overreach and underreach. Some people who shouldn't be served are gonna be, and a lot of people who should be aren't gonna be. And it,
You know, one
to
of the
me, it's just
things,
indicative of why you
yeah.
shouldn't have healthcare managed from the top up, but, you know, no one asked me.
Right, and they didn't ask a lot of people, but.
And they probably won't.
Yeah, you know, one of the things is some states that have gone to managed care did not roll their long-term service and support group into that managed care. Or they did it slowly. They didn't do it boom, boom, boom like Iowa did. And so these are the folks that we're talking about, the folks that are in, you know, a 24-hour living situation. Maybe they need nursing care, they need 24-hour, they need 2-person lifts to transfer, things like that. Those folks were not, in some states, not rolled into a rapid changeover to managed care. And Iowa did that, and I think that, you know, part of the problems that people are having is because, number one, it went very, very quickly. Number two, maybe we should have studied this population over here a little better before we rolled everything in to kind of a one-size-fits-all
Yeah, I think
system.
that's, you know, Mike always said that managed care was a decent idea, but he said really it only fit one of 3 populations. And the
Right.
problem is they tried to hit all 3 populations with it. Same thing we always do. I don't know why we always, you know, continue to use shotguns when we should be using rifles.
Yeah.
You know, we're, instead of going to a point solution, we're trying to make it fit everybody, and it doesn't fit everybody.
Well, and if you look at the county system was actually a managed care system, you know? You had to apply, you had to be eligible. Here's the array of services. There were assessments done to base what your need for service was. You worked with a case manager or a care coordinator, and, you know, it was a mindful, planful type of service and funding stream. And, you know, of course, we've always had that yo-yo funding stream with the state, you know. Nathan, I don't know if you shared the document that Lori sent out with the board, and I can send it out on the legislative history of funding and.
I don't think I don't think I have.
Okay, I can email that out to everyone, and I will do that. But, you know, the saga continues, and we will continue in Muscatine County to look at people's needs, you know, do our best that we can under the structure and system we currently have, and advocating for, you know, the current level of services that we're doing when we go into the regional planning sessions.
I don't know if you were stuck outside earlier or.
Oh, I was.
But stuff works best when the people you're accountable to can look in the eye.
Absolutely.
And say what's wrong, and that, you know, that's.
Absolutely.
You know, leaving this as much as local as possible is the way
Yeah.
it works, you know, that's how government's gonna be responsive, it should be.
Well, that's why I feel really strongly about our trust program, you know, the things we can do locally. Also, you know, one of the bright spots that we just had, Judge Rydell had approached me a couple of months ago about putting together a meeting to talk about the commitment process, because there's a lot of parties involved with the commitment process. You know, we've got law enforcement, we've got the hospital, we've got our Eastern Iowa crisis system, we've got community services. And we did meet last Monday on August 29th. We had 24 people representing all of those entities, and you know, focused on what's going well with our current commitment process. What do we need to tweak? What are the biggest concerns of everyone? Really, the biggest concern that kept coming up was, you know, between our law enforcement folks and the hospital about safety of everybody. And so they're gonna be talking to each other. We're gonna be scheduling another meeting down the road. And just part of it was educating people. The last time we had one of these meetings was in 2015, and so a lot of different players. And, you know, they've got a new person over at the clerk of court who's learning the commitment process, and so that was.
2 or 3 new judges just in that. So.
Yes, we do. At the last meeting, we had Judge Rydell, Judge Strasser, we had Magistrate Baker and Magistrate Wonder, and now we've added Magistrate Neary to the mix. You know, some new folks over at the clerk's office. There have been some changes with the folks at the hospital. Our law enforcement folks are pretty much stayed the same, but you know, just continuing to work together and make that process as smooth as we can, educate people on what the alternatives to commitments are, and just continue to strengthen those community-based services that people can access before you get to a point where you're feeling like you've got to have a family member or a friend, you know, committed. Because you're taking away somebody's rights temporarily to get them to comply with some treatment. And, you know, it's always better when people do things on a voluntary basis. So we've been busy. We've been busy. you have any further questions for me? All right, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Have a great day. We'll keep up the work. And the regional planning, strategic planning sessions are gonna be in December now.
We didn't nail down the dates, did we?
Yes, she did.
We did, we got, okay.
Yeah, it will be December 6th and December 13th. There'll be 3 sessions. One session will be with the governing board. Jeff Schott with the University of Iowa is gonna be the facilitator. And then one session will be with the management team, which are the directors from the 5 counties. And then everybody will be together on December 13th. So it was rescheduled. It was originally planned for October, but as people were thinking about it, we could potentially have 4 new governing board members. And so it just made sense to wait. And, you know, hopefully those new people, plus the people that are currently on the governing board, if there are any new people, I don't know. There'll be at least, I think, 2, because people aren't running again. So, you know, to have the new people in the, what's that?
I don't wanna be.
Who's on the governing board now?
Dawn, Jack Wiley, Sean Hammerling, who's not running again, and,
Carol Earnhardt, who is also not running again.
Carol's not running and Jack's not running, are they?
No, Jack is running.
Jack is running.
Jack
Yeah.
is? Oh, I thought he was
But
retiring.
Sean's not.
Sean's not
Sean's
running.
not.
But yeah, he was gonna
Jack
retire.
and
He
Carol,
decided to
Jack
run.
and Carol will be greatly missed.
Yes, they will.
If they're, when they're off, because
Yeah, I think.
Jack has been doing mental health stuff for.
Oh, Jack's
very
been on the state committees
long time,
forever.
long time.
You know, you might be right on that.
Well, he's been a supervisor in Jackson County for 30 years, so he's got good experience. It's hard to replace that experience.
Definitely is, so. All right, thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you, Kathy.
Bye.
Next on the agenda is discussion and possible action to approve the minutes of the October 29, 2018 regular meeting. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bob, second by Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Correspondence, Bob, do you have anything?
Nothing.
Nathan? I had nothing. Jeff?
Nothing to note.
Matt?
No, sir.
How about any committee reports, Matt?
Not last week.
Not last week. Jeff?
No.
I had none last week either. Nathan?
No, that 5th week of the month doesn't have much.
Doesn't have much. Bob, how about you?
On Tuesday, I had the Emergency Management Commission, where we, of course, had the introduction of our new management director. We also approved bills and reviewed the current inventory that we have of vehicles and so forth. And we're working our way through that. We also, give the new manager the ability to bring back quotes for a vehicle. That should pull the trailer. We'll see what that comes back, but I'll keep you informed. That was it.
Okay, very good, thank you. Next up is receive information from county employees. Any county employees want to address? Keith, like to step up?
Good morning. Had a couple items to give to you today. First is the 2018 Weed Commissioners Report, which we're required to give you a copy and then send it on to the Department of Agriculture. So,
okay,
give it that hereafter. Wanted to also mention we received a letter from the Army Corps on comments on our 120th Street Bridge project in the far northwest corner. That's that red square. That's the historic bridge that I've mentioned before. So, and I've also mentioned we think this process will delay replacing that bridge several years.
Even more historic.
Yes. A similar outcome in the past, I guess I'm gonna say we can hope for a similar outcome, is you have to hire an expert to compile a historical record, photos and things, and that's probably going to cost you less than $20,000, but probably most of $20,000 too. That's the best outcome we can hope for. Worst case would be the bridge stays there until it falls down, which the farmers in the area probably won't like, but our hands are tied.
Okay.
Then an update on projects. I just want to note the culvert project on Iron City Avenue is open to traffic. The project is not totally completed in that the ditches are full of water still, and there it needs some grading as part of the project. So your guess is as good as mine if that will occur this year. Probably not, but the culvert's in, the road's open, but there's gonna be a little work remain. The sub-drains culvert repairs on G28 are completed. The bridge deck patching work in various bridges throughout the county is all completed. The parking lot project, they have one large pour on the large west half left to do, that the weather's gonna dictate that. Having turned wet, if it was dry, then I would tell you they're probably pouring it tomorrow. But the outlook's not real good for the week. I think that's not on construction projects. Design, the G28 231st project check plans have been submitted to DOT. Right now we're scheduled for a March letting, although if right-of-way acquisition doesn't move along real quickly, we're probably gonna get bumped to the April letting. I guess that's kind of our best guess.
Still no word back on the right of way, or
No.
they're communicating finally?
No.
Are local contacts any help with that?
They are, but I mean, they have to defer to the southeast and Nashville, so hopefully we'll get an update this week on that. Still have right of way to go on the North Isaac Bridge project, and then our main slide repairs, which is G14 or 140th and F70. Just we had made temporary repairs, good quality temporary repairs. But matter of fact, the excavation from the parking lot project provided the material to do those repairs, so that actually worked out good. And those will be designed this winter for possible projects next year. I think that's everything I have.
All right, very good. Thank you, Keith. Number 13, items with the administration office. A is action to accept October 2018 payroll claims.
Move. Second.
Motion by Nathan? No, Bob. Motion by Bob, second by Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Anything else, Nancy?
Yeah, I want to remind you that next Monday is a county holiday, so you won't have a board meeting. But because next Monday is a county holiday, the canvass for the general election will be next Wednesday morning. And we need to have at least a quorum here.
So that's 14th.
Yes.
Okay.
What time, 9?
You guys tell me what time, if something will work better than 9. I think Leslie would probably prefer not to do it right at 8 o'clock.
No, I understand.
I'm fine with 9.
Works.
You're not gonna allow me to sleep in?
Bob, you'll get your
You can, as long as there's 3 of us here.
That's right.
Think of it that way.
Good.
Yeah, I'm okay with 9.
You good? Okay.
I can make it work.
It's the
14th?
14th,
14th, isn't
9
it?
a.m.
I will be out of town, but I will go to check.
All right, perfect. That's all I have.
Okay, that's all you have?
Yep.
Very good. If there's, excuse me, nothing else to come before the board, meeting's adjourned.